Okay. It is with great joy, delight, and pride that I have the privilege of introducing to some and presenting again to others our upcoming keynote, Peggy Piesche. Before reading her bio, I would just like to make a few comments of my own about Peggy and her relationship to me and the BGHRA. Though she has presented and attended most of our conferences, this is the first time we've had the honor of hosting her as a keynote, and for this I'm extremely grateful today. When we pay respect to those who came before us and on whose shoulders we stand, most often we mean someone more advanced in age than ourselves. But in this instance, it is imperative that I acknowledge Peggy as one whose research and tireless efforts in education and towards social justice and increased visibility for the globally situated Black German community long preceded mine. She has been both a mentor and an inspiration to me, inside and outside of academia, and in her own way, her tough love has been a guiding light through my personal Black German journey. I can recall listening to Peggy's talks and reading her articles as a returning undergraduate student in my 50s. I was in awe of her brilliance when I heard her speak about agency and spaces and terms and ideas I had no clue about. At times, I was totally overwhelmed, embarrassed, and lost, but it was Peggy who took the time to explain those ideas to me and who introduced me to Google Scholar and, among many things, the importance of community, turtles, and kitchen table talk. I could go on and on reminiscing about the times and conversations we've shared together, but I suppose you've gotten the point by now. So I'll read her official bio, after which I'll turn the virtual microphone over to our featured keynote speaker. Peggy Piesche, born and raised in the GDR, is a Black German literary and cultural scholar. At the Federal Agency for Civic Education, she heads the Political Education and Plural Democracy Department at the New Era location, focusing on intersectional, transformational, and memory knowledge, diversity, intersectionality, and decoloniality, and racism critical political education. It focuses on social dimensions and risks of discrimination and works with different communities to develop strategies for breaking down and overcoming barriers to participation. She has been active in the Black German movement since 1990 and is a member of BGHRA e.V., Black Women in Germany. She is also on numerous advisory boards, including the new Equality Advisory Board on anti-Black racism and equality of people of African descent as part of the UN Decade of the State of Berlin. She therefore continues to envision a Black feminist education center. And so now, without further delay, Peggy Piesche. Peggy, it's all yours.
Thank you so much. I'm very delighted. I'm very honored. I feel very happy. I feel a lot of joy right now to be here. And Rosemary, you know, my tears are coming to my eyes for listening to you describing the journey the two of us we're so privileged to be together within. Yeah, and I saw already some names, so I'm very happy and curious about the conversations we will go on later after I will talk a little bit. I hope the internet connection will hold because I'm here somewhere auf dem Plattenland in West Germany, in a space for the Movement Foundation, where I'm also working with them together for hopefully a better world. But yeah, thank you very much for the invitation and this very kind introduction. I still remember when we met, Rosemary, and it was in a space of joy and pain. Joy as in Black joy, siblings meeting for the first time, exchanging our stories, our experiences, some of which we are shared, some of which were different. Pain also as in collective trauma experience, which we all are too familiar with. Pain also as in the strengths it took and takes to dig out and to keep up connections. It always seems something we do on our own as an individual, as being in alone. But Black joy trumps pain, since we shared since we were in a space of Black community, the Bundestreffen, with you, Rose, and our dear friend Ruth, who I think I also saw already being in our virtual space here together. A space where Black Germans coming together. At this Bundestreffen, we could connect to other Black lives which felt the same. So now we are not alone, not digging out or fighting alone. There is a lot of joy in the knowledge of a movement and being a part of it. Black joy is to have spaces where Black lives come together and can exhale. So the BGHRA conference is such a space of Black joy. Also, we are not in a physical space here together. I know this for sure that this is a space of Black joy because I could witness this for many years now, seeing younger Black scholars joining the BGHRA family. So if Black joy is having these spaces, it must also be Black joy creating and holding these spaces with ups and downs, and spoiler alarm, Black joy trumps the pain. In the following, I want to talk about creating and holding Black spaces to exhale. And I want to do that with the example of a work I'm involved in, and I call it From Best to In Best, Black Joy Always Trumps Pain. So the project of BEST, Black European Studies, some people probably are familiar with, is now leading in the new project, which we're calling Intersectional Black European Studies. As a part of the UN Decade for People of African Descent, we decided to focus on the implementation of collective Black knowledge production within academia, also in Germany. Because not a single Black Studies Institute or a Black Studies Chair exists in Europe, and at this time, which already should be enough reason for doing this right now. But there are also some reasons for the German situation or the German context which are very important. All debates on post-colonialism, on the remembrance of Germany's colonial history, on the longevity of coloniality, on structural racism and various definitions of racism are embedded in this connection of a collective Black knowledge production. They are as a matter, they are strongly informed by collective Black knowledge productions. It dates back for many centuries, and especially in the younger time, the last decades, where Black activists and scholars worked hard on bringing this knowledge also collectively together. To academia, this knowledge came through students, through lecturers, through visiting professors, and also professors who we could call professors from within, from without, so to speak, like Fatima El-Tayeb or Vanessa Thompson. So Black scholars, very often Black feminist, queer feminist scholars who didn't get their credentials in Germany, who couldn't get their knowledge productions implemented into the German academia, and who went out in the world, very often in the Anglophone academia, and then could develop their work, could connect and be very active and influential also in the Black diaspora, to then influence the German academic process, so to speak, back. But Germany itself still keeps it as an white academia, picking sometimes from collective Black knowledge. So that already shows the big void we are dealing with. But furthermore, we are also experiencing an imbalance in these debates, which we have and which are sometimes very heated, and right now especially. Since these collective Black knowledge productions are either being sucked into the white normative academic frame, as I already touched upon that, and you can see that in various critical studies, we have already implemented a lot where Black scholars worked hard for, without the acknowledgement of this collective Black knowledge production. Or on the other side, and mostly simultaneously, these knowledge productions are actively delegitimized as an activist and not academic work, which seems to be still a very big distinction in the German academia. So especially the Black queer feminist movement is working to implement this knowledge production systematically now for years. And since this last decade, we are doing this under the umbrella of the UN Decade for people of African descent, because that Germany also ratified this UN Decade, and it was a very good opening to focus on Black people in Germany who are, as a group, not being recognized in from the German government still. So this decade was to focus and to forelight people of African descent. We are now at the end of the decade, and unfortunately, also spoiler alert, we do not have intersectional Black European studies already implemented, so we still have to work on this. The team of intersectional Black European studies is basically a cooperation between Professor Maureen Maisha Auma from the Technical University in Berlin, with Professor Fatima El Tayeb from Yale University, and Dr. Denise Bergold Cardwell, who is located at the University of Innsbruck, together with a practical cooperation of from Katja Kinder, the director of the ERA in Berlin, which is an organization for educational justice, and myself from the Federal Agency of Civic Education. So since 2022, we are actively pushing this notion on intersectional Black European studies. And we built on, as Rose already said, we built on what came before us and the work others were doing, and this work already built up on other works as well. So I want to focus on the best part, the Black European studies, where we already took a part of the name, and I can explain that a little later. The focus of my work within this InBest dates back to our work on Black European studies, an interdisciplinary research project we started in 2004, which I co-founded together with Fatima El Tayeb, Randolph Oxman, and Sarah Lennox from the University of Massachusetts in Amherst. We imagined BEST, as we called it, as an institution that we missed in our own educational development and academic environment. And that was also a void within we met Rosemary, and where we also could go away together. Black Europeans, their lives and works in past and present was mostly being perceived as alien to the concept of Europeanness and a nation state. Back in the day, I was a young Black queer academic without a doctoral degree, working in the Netherlands, still trying to find my place in academia with the intersection of community activism. As I said, Black Europeans were clearly perceived as foreign and reminded unintelligible to the concept of Europeanness in academia. Nevertheless, community activists and academics researched and published on different aspects of Blackness in Europe, respectively in Germany. Our goal was to advance this knowledge about the century-old histories of Black Europeans, to bring together scholars from different disciplines who have previously worked mostly on their own in disciplinary isolation, and to advance the development of new theoretical and methodological tools for understanding the African diaspora in Europe. As I already mentioned, this idea of being as a foreign and unintelligible was not only a focus or a matter of an academic subject. It also meant that people of African descent studying either African studies, European studies, history in general, or even German studies couldn't find themselves in it. So it always meant that we remained unintelligible to the studies and the subjects we were in our own, we were consulting in our own educational upbringings. So that that meant partially we remained unintelligible also to ourselves. And since the academic and activist part were always very intertwined, young people knew ways, found ways to deal with that. We did research on ourselves, exchanged literature back in the day uh, um, without internet and also yeah, handies to photocopy anything. Um, and also at these meetings, for example, at the Bundestreffen, we held workshops where we basically educated each other on these findings to collect knowledge. And that, when we started Black European Studies, we saw and we brought that together, that this was not just a matter of an national focus, but the Black communities always were transnational connected, and especially when it came to question of knowledge production, they were in a very vivid exchange with each other. So it was very clear to us that we are not just aiming for Black German studies, but that the matter of Black people in Germany had to be researched and critical, embedded in academia in the context of European studies, European history, Black European history. So until 2007, we organized 2 conferences and transnational networks focusing on topics as representing Black Europeans' history, networking strategies, such as international political organizations, racism in the academia, Black European studies, the curricula, and empirical research. After the Volkswagen grant ended in 2007, we were not able to secure other fundings, as the white European or also German academia's attention moved on to the next special topic, which would not last and not being implemented into the regular curriculum either. But one step back, as we started to think about Black European studies, Black Europeans, their lives and works were, as I said, not being part of the concept of Europeanness. This was also what we encountered when we started to search for funding options for this project. We were then able to secure the funding from Volkswagen Foundation. But as we started to talk to them about our application within their new program, the own and the foreign, the other, das eigene und das Fremde, we got in contact with the foundation about our project ideas. We very quickly realized that the idea of Black Europeans was totally unintelligible for them within this concept of the own and the foreign, because they always guided us to other examples what they were funding, and it was always like, the other, the Black people, were somewhere located outside of Europe itself. It was hard to make us intelligible to matrix our program, but finally we managed to get them on board and to understand that the own is being perceived as the Black Europeans, that our project also fit into their project, which it challenged the normalized notion of the own and the foreign. So finally, we were actually very happy with the Volkswagen Foundation that they would go with us. After being granted the funding, we organized a first interdisciplinary conference, which we imagined as an intense workshop with a few people in the field to map out the necessities and deepen the next steps. Together with scholars and activists such as Maisha Aouma, Philomena Asset, Alexander Vielle, and others at the conference, we focused on regional and interdisciplinary interests and started out a mapping of Black European studies in Europe. The original plan was to continue to work in working groups together, but the interest in BEST and the call for this conference was really overwhelming, so that we decided to organize another conference a year later. So this intensive workshop in Frankfurt back at the first conference we called Challenging Europe, Black European Studies in the 21st Century was in 2005. The second conference followed in 2006. We are called Black European Studies in Transnational Perspective, took place in Berlin and continued to address the African diaspora as part of intra-European history and put the exchange of ideas that has begun on a broader footing. But above all, our goal was to further the connectivity and transfer of knowledge between Black political movements and their academic work in Europe. So we got over 100 contributions to discuss topics like representing Black European history, networking strategies, international political organizations, racism and the academia, Black European Studies curricula, and also empirical research subjects and objects. We also tried to map out a first methodology and urged all of these foci to deal with questions and contexts like how have Black Europeans conceived themselves historically? Do they understand themselves as Black, decolonized African, and or as part of an international community? What is their relationship to Africa and to other parts of African diaspora? What is their relationship to other ethnical minorities in Europe? That was very important to us because from the political movements and communities of Black people in Germany and their connections within Europe, it was always a strong solidaric connections to other marginalized communities, and as we now would say, racialized minorities. And we know about how divide and conquer functions. So from the beginning, it was a focus on how would we actually write this history when we do it in a strong solidaric connections. And further questions like, what is the relationship of categories like nation, gender, class, and racialization to the category of Black Europe? European unity and its expansion. So the European creation myth was one of the main topics because, and that might also connect back to the hesitation of the Volkswagen Stiftung Foundation. If you start to acknowledge Black Europeans as people from within and as an inherent part of Europe, it also has to question the normalized notion of Europeanness, and by that the creation myth of Europe. And of course, the self-representation of Black Europeans as indigenous or others. Black European self-articulation in political and other forms of representations, and a Black European research perspective as an academic discourse was also on a focus of this conference. In 2007, we finally held a gathering at the University of Massachusetts with Sarah Lennox, wrapping up the 3 years long project, which laid out a point of references for a complex trans-diasporic understanding of Black Europeanness. In the following years, it became a symbolic resource, as Maisha Auma puts it, a school of thought. So best, also it it was not implemented further, turned in a kind of a school of thought. As best couldn't build on an institutional foundation in most of the European countries, following up projects were quicker established overseas. And by overseas, I mainly mean the US. With regard to publication pressures for young scholars, one could also say the institution took over. So, and we had no other tools to resist this. With this pressure of where to publish and how the credentials has to look like, a school of thought could not continue to work there. Our objective was to facilitate a space, a network, and to collect the production of transnational Black scholarship, all from a Black European point of view. Because, make no mistake, all of the above is being worked out, researched, published, and certainly be hold on in various academic chairs from a wide perspective. This continued in different spaces, always in a strong connection with Black feminist political movements and trans-diasporic academic organizations, such as ASWAD, where Maisha Auma and myself have been board members. But also it continues at the GSA in connections with a lot of younger scholars also on Black European studies 10 years after, for example, with Kavina King. And I think I saw you also here. I'm looking very much forward to see you later. So best works continued, one could say, with a new generation of scholars and activists as an archive. And as an archive, it went into InBest, Intersectional Black European Studies. InBest, Intersectional Black European Studies, brings all of that together and centers intersectionality and in where BEST is grounded in. As BEST couldn't build this institutional foundation, we are now taking up the baton and hope to continue this work 10 years later. But let me see. Yeah, exactly. So the approach back at the time was very much community-based and guided. And that at the time clashed with the hegemonic standards of professionalization within the academia. But the community-based and guided research focus on Black European studies continued in other spaces, always in the strong connections as I laid it out. Now, finally, BEST continues with this new generation. I'm just let me see. In BEST, which is working for two years now. And as I laid out, the focus now is especially on the knowledge production from a larger community driven knowledge production. That means we are looking for ways, not so much collecting the topics and bringing together courses or curricula, but rather how to make sure that this connection to the academia and back to the communities is granted and is will help and not only stay in fall with people who are hired. So that is the main new focus. But of course, we have the same problems as always, the question of funding. I can say something about that later on in the discussion. But let me finish with on a positive note. I'm envisioning InBest, so intersectional Black European studies, as a diasporic, transdisciplinary platform that brings together and centers community-based and guided work on Black European studies, using the tools of intersectionality to hold us to our own ethical standards. So we can make it better this time. And as Katja Kinder always reminds us, focusing on inclusion and not only on the most privileged ones of our community is central to our understanding of knowledge productions. And in this, I would say, Black joy always trumps pain. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Peggy. And now it's me being brought to tears as I remember BEST and, you know, and also remember rooting through the website and all of the resources that were left there for years. So it's wonderful to hear that it's being, I guess, resurrected, I guess, or renewed, I guess is a better term to say, and that it won't go away because, as I said in my intro, it's important that we acknowledge the past as we go forward so that we're all not stepping over each other, reinventing the wheel, so to speak, you know? So I look forward to seeing more and hearing more about it in the future. Um, I'd love to hear you say something about how you feel our project here has evolved. You've been here for a long time. You were at our first conference when Noah gave her talk, and moving forward. And I guess you can see that we have also somewhat evolved. Um, Also, the big change came with the pandemic when we could no longer meet in person. But of course, we hope to again. So I'd love to hear your observations for your sister groups over here and how you think we've done over these years.
Yes, certainly. Well, I think it was a joy also to witness the development of your project and your vision. And I remember very well when we were, I think it was in Washington, in DC, at the conference, back in the day. And I think a lot from what I had just described from best to in best is an experience you can share, that uh, how to hold the spaces and hold them up, regardless of whether the funding is coming or not, and who is still or at the time, quote unquote, believing in the new shiny thing, and then moving on to the next new shining thing. It's a continuously working and work, and that is what you also done, and I think it totally works. I love to see it. I'm happy to see it, that it is alive, and that it is also to the oriented to the future. So what I see is that Rose, you created the space for Black Germans in the US, connecting with other Black people in Germany, but in the whole, also in the whole diaspora, and to have a space, what I said in the beginning, to exhale, to exchange the experiences, and to give a little help to younger generations, to, if possible, to make it easier for new generations, and not to jump to all the hoops we had to jump through, or go through, all the rounds to get to a point, but also just to be with each other. So it is something which was very much needed. I also remember, us being together with Angela Davis, for example, at um, uh, um,
Vessel.
in Poughkeepsie, exactly,
Yeah.
where Angela Davis was. She needed a moment to
Mhm.
to understand, and to basically get a grip on that she is in a space of Black Germans in the US, and I think I was the only
Mhm.
one from Germany also. So it was not, it also, it refocus and gives a new perspective to this normalized also national frame, and that is one of the most important influences of your work. I would say, to challenge this whole notion of what the national frame is, in this sense, where
Mhm.
Black Germans have to be, or where they have to be connected to Germany, or whatever. But in the most important part, and for that I applaud you a lot, to hold the space, because as we can see that from yeah, best now, 20 plus years to intersectional Black European studies, it takes time, and somebody has to hold the space. And you did this with your organization. And yeah, I hope that there are a lot of younger people in the room, because I'm getting grayer and grayer and also feel like want to pass on the baton. So yes,
Yeah.
that would be my answer.
Yeah, and actually that brings me to my next question. What are the younger people doing? I mean, we reminisced about what history, and how the groundwork has been laid. But the younger people are facing newer problems, and they're, I would assume, greater in number. Where are they now? How is it perhaps easier and better for them? And what new challenges might they face?
Yeah, I hope that some of our younger colleagues in the room can also, come up and address that a little bit. But what I can say for the situation in Germany or in Berlin is they are there, they are out there, and that's great. It's a huge relief to see that we truly can speak about a movement. So it is a movement
Mhm.
means it's not only connected to individuals. It is, as Katharina Auchentoye once said, it's like a train. When once
Mhm.
it takes speed, it will move. And what this train does, it is connecting other cars, at a certain station, but you cannot stop the train. So it's a really
Yeah.
beautiful picture she created in the book. Your silence won't now I can't translate it. Euer Schweigen schützt euch nicht. Now I
It
cannot
won't protect
retranslate
you.
it.
Your
I'm sorry.
silence won't
It's
protect you.
it won't protect you. Your silence
Yeah.
won't protect you. From Audre Lorde. I already, looked
Yeah.
into the questions here,
It's,
and of course it is from Audre Lorde. I use
yeah.
this quote for the book. It's not. I will not say it's from me. But so as
Mhm.
Katharina, I think it's a beautiful picture. It shows the train is riding, and younger people they they have a lot of challenges we didn't have. So the relationship, also intergenerational relationship, should also not be like what can they do for us or something, but also what can we do for them, because the challenges younger generations are up to. In some in some moments where I say I'm so glad I'm already so old, and that
Yeah.
shows me that younger generations, they have to pick up some stuff we left, that is not easy. But on a positive note, we, in Berlin, we still hold the ADEFRA monthly gathering, and a lot of younger people coming there, and connecting with each other. They do their work very often. Topics are maybe a little more different from what we started out 30 years ago, and that's fine. It would be a little bit odd if they just, if we would still talk about the 90s. Um, but concepts of inclusiveness, in terms of multi-layered identities, concepts of solidarities, is more in the focus, and of course. Black lives in climate change are very important topics. So we are there and in exchange, and we will, pass on the baton. So within InBest, there is a group, for example, looking into how knowledge of Black movements on climate justice can be part of a curriculum in intersectional Black European studies, or a very important part of the curriculum, how body work can be included in a sense of overcoming and dealing with racial trauma, and acknowledging that with this racial trauma that is embodied in us, and by that always presented once we are in a room to focus on education, focus on knowledge, to focus on history. That is all in us. And so there is a lot of new, fresh ideas. This curriculum part is led by Katja Kinder, who's pushing this very much. And that's great work. And young people who are much more, looking and focusing on an connection, not only being in this head fighting, so to speak, fighting the system, but say, focusing on that this racial to address this racial trauma also in our bodies.
I love that you mentioned the Black German movement. And I love that you perceive it as not a fixed movement that was only in the 1980s. I think that if one were relying on the academic narrative here in the US, the movement began and stopped sort of at that time. And it sort of erases for me the movement and the flow from after that time and continuing on. So I think that's an important, obviously that particular time was foundational and for a lot of ideas, and in particular for identity. But like you said, the train left the station and it's not stopped moving. And since then, I guess with the internet, you can say it's been flying, right? It's not even landlocked anymore. So I think that's just a beautiful thing. And it leaves us not static, you know?
Say again, at least?
It leaves us not static. We're not locked into ideas that academia may have created about who is a Black German, what is a Black German, what is that experience that that does not necessarily reflect the reality of the multiplicity of our experiences. So I think that why I'm happy to hear that there's a continued effort to make to institutionalize this education. There's been so much education done outside of the institutions, right? That must be brought together. So I'm really grateful for the work that's been done outside of the institutions. And I love that in your article, in your conversation with Sarah and remapping, right? And that's obviously one of my favorite things to read and has sort of been a guide for me henceforth, because I think it's important that we not, as a people, as a group, as a community, not be ascribed certain characteristics, behaviors, and ideas by other people based on a few books that were written in the 80s, because we've still been here, and a lot has happened. And I think that, which is again why I intentionally am focusing on joy, because we could also stay locked into the adoptees, right? Into that pain, but the adoptees are flourishing. They're doctor adoptees, lawyer adoptees. So if we infantilize them and keep them in history, we're doing the same thing when we talk about the multi-generational work and activism of Black Germans. We don't want to lock it in anywhere, because we also want the young people to recognize that they can begin anywhere, in whatever space they are in, and creating it its own, which is why we enjoyed focusing last year on art as resistance, because sometimes just having joy and creating for yourself is resistance, because that's not, we're supposed to be constantly being, your words, reactive, right? And I love
Mhm.
that we're no longer
Yeah, yeah.
in that mode. You know, we're just
Mhm.
creating and enjoying each other and ourselves and creating a path for our kids. So I guess we can talk
Yeah.
forever, but it's time to open up the space
Yeah.
for other people to ask questions,
Mhm.
right? Let's
Yeah.
see. Okay, here's one. What advice do you have for younger Black academics who want to join the fight for an implementation of intersectional European studies?
Wonderful. Uh, well, I don't have so much advice. Just, follow your path and connect with other young Black scholars from other countries, from other regions, and always know we are everywhere, because I think
Mhm.
that is a very important part. We still have to, or we always have to remind ourselves, because the normalization is so strong and so strong working, um, that that we are not, following in the trap of being exclusionary, being the only one in the room,
Mhm.
or I'm,
Mhm.
I'm, if when we are invited somewhere by the academic system, for example, but it works also in other circumstances, you can be sure that tokenism is at least a part of it, And
Mhm.
normalization works very deeply, and it's a toxic invitation, because it tells me it's a nice feeling. It's only me, And if I'm not doing my work and thinking there where I'm going, where are the Black scholars? Where are the young Black scholars there, who are doing the daily work? If I'm not doing that, then I'm sitting there and I'm not prepared to exchange, to connect with other people. Because be sure that if you are invited by department XYZ, they will not do the work for you. They will not tell you or ask you, no. So by the way, do you want to connect with the community, or here is your itinerary, and here you have 2 days for doing your connections with the community. That never happens. So we have to do that ourselves, and that is a little bit of tough love, which we have to give each other, meaning to learn about our experience. And as you said, Rose, the couple of books and articles from the 1980s and 90s are not enough for that. So a part of that also means, yeah, connect with young people, be critical also of everything what is achieved. It's wonderful to have a book, but be also critical about that. It's like with every other academic research, with every other academic field. It's in motion, it's in development. So not everything what is written in the 90s or even in the early 2000s is still up to date or is even true. So get in contact, connect yourself, and not just do it from books. And if you don't speak the language, you need to work around, and especially always acknowledge that we are very often very privileged. Even with my lousy English, I'm privileged to be able to read English. Not everybody can do that, but still has a story to tell, and still their experiences matters, and might be truer than some of our, English bubbled academic knowledge productions. So I think it comes down to stay connected with the communities, because they hold us honest. That is always true, when to connect you back to the community that hold you honest.
Yeah. Well, and speaking of that, before I go to the next audience question, because I have the privilege, I just have to ask you this. What about translation? And I say that because, my generation, yes, I'm privileged, but my generation of Black Germans, most are not privileged to understand German. And much of what was written that is important to us, I'm thinking of Yara's book, has not been translated. So I just wonder if that is in the mindset, if these translations are being considered in Germany, what was written in German before, even your book, or Schweigen, Schutzdessen, those books. I can't read it completely. I can fish through it, but again, I'm privileged. But my other adoptee brothers and sisters are not going to be able to read it, and in their 60s are not going back to school to learn German. But I just think it's important just to increase the audience anyway, because there, as you said, there are Black Germans everywhere. So that's something important to me. So I just wondered if that was something that my sisters and brothers were thinking about in Germany. Uh-oh.
Hmm? I th I think it's that's an important part, and we can deal with it in a technical way and try to secure funding for translation. But again, then we are depending on the flow of the money.
Sure.
But it is just also to find other ways to stay national connected. And
Mhm.
yeah, and the
Yeah.
first part is to be aware of it and to be sensitive also about languages we do not speak, and also people who then are not able to connect with us because they are outside of this international language frames. And since there was the question also about Latin America and also Rio de Janeiro, that would be, one example. I unfortunately don't speak Portuguese or Brazilian
Mhm.
Portuguese, so I have to be very sensitive about that. Um, but I know people who do that and who do their research there, and so I'm personally not involved in that. But as I mentioned, the the uh, the core of intersectional Black European studies is always to have a solidaric connection and a solidaric exchange with other racialized groups' experiences. And there are also young scholars, for example, right now in Germany, working and are part of the IMBES community, who are working, for example, on translation of poets like Audre Lorde into Portuguese, and also uh, um, yeah, comparing that also with Afro-Brazilian poets, their works. So I think that is that's wonderful, and they're bringing in also their research findings into the InBest community as well.
Yeah, it's nice to be of a certain age, even though I still claim more senior, but to watch the young people get excited about continuing the work and supporting them, I consider that a real honor. We have a question from Claudia Regina Esteves. How does Professor Piesche see the rapprochement between Black German researchers and their colleagues in Latin America? For example, in June, we will be holding the first Congress of Afro-Latin American and Caribbean researchers in Rio de Janeiro.
Well, it's wonderful. It's great that you have
Mm-hmm.
that, and I'm pretty sure you can, reach out to people who do have who do this work. I can, get you in contact also with one researcher who is doing this connection between Brazilian and Black German works, so in literature. Um, so yeah, I'm not so much into that, especially due to the language barrier.
Yeah. Amy Lynn Hill says white scholars are guests in Black spaces of joy, research, or otherwise. So how can we best the best? How can we best the best guests be the best guests possible when we have the privilege to enter these spaces?
Um, I don't really know about the concept of guest. I think uh, Rose, you already mentioned the conversation Sarah and I had a couple of years ago in her book Remapping Black Germany. And I admire Sarah very much, and she's been a great ally, a great mentor to me. And we are both, I would say, critical friends to each other. And I like this concept of critical friends better because I think that is more liable in wrong, reliable. It is more reliable, this concept, other than, guest. Because as a critical friend, um, there's there are some intellectual expectations in both ways. If you are critique, you are open yourself to re-critique and also to contextualization of their own critique. And I think that is a better way to get into a relationship than being a guest, because I could also go on, and I don't want to bring it to the way of Derrida, but a guest, somebody has to host a guest, and I'm not sure if that is the right theoretical relationship Black and white scholars should have together. That would be one answer. And a second part of the answer is, again, look very strongly into the concept of allyship, because I believe allyship is something you can, we all have to do different tasks, and we have different jobs in the room. And if we do this job, um, then we are allies to each other. And mostly these jobs are not intertwining with each other, meaning that somebody has to hold that the space for white allies. But if white allies work with other white people on the white curriculum, on the white academia, on who do you hire, how do you keep Black and other minorities in the space? How do you how to create and can help facilitate spaces for Black people to exchange and get to their knowledge? All of that is possible, and that is would be allyship.
Thank you. An anonymous attendee referring back to translation comments, often I hear that translations aren't good enough, inauthentic, and that translators are missing the point. I am a translation studies and sociology major now in grad school who finds this problematic, to put it mildly. I agree that it is important to resist this kind of attitude towards translated works as scholars of intersectional Black German studies and beyond. Thank you, Dr. Pena and Dr. Piesche, for bringing this up.
Yeah, thank you for your observation and your comments. Well, that's, and all of our disciplines work further to, break open or break through the normalization. Translation studies, there are more and more groups. There's a group on Black translators in Germany also, who came together because of these you made, but also on the question of situated knowledge and the meaning and the consequences of situated knowledge as being translator of, for example, Black books. That is important for all of us to do more critical work in these disciplines. And I feel you. I can imagine that that sometimes it's a dire work when you are still confronted with a very hegemonic perspective, what we actually should have been left in the 20th century. But we still have to work on it.
Thank you. So Spencer says, greetings, Peggy. It's wonderful to see you. Do you think there is any hope to pursue or create Black financial resources to support our work in the U.S. and abroad?
Ruth,
I wonder if
I'm very
that's
happy
our
also
friend.
that must be Ruth, I would say
Yeah.
so. No? So maybe she can come up here. That would be also nice. Yeah, we do have a collaboration right now, an official collaboration with the Yale University. But the point is, we want to learn from earlier paths. That's why we are so very closely in connection with BEST. Yeah, a lot of things are so much easier in the US. Not all things, don't get me wrong, but some things seems to be easier, and we could, locate in BEST in the US or maybe even in Yale. But that is not our focus. We make very clear, or for example, I just had a conversation with another professor here in Germany who would be able to connect us with the so-called DACH academia system, that is Germany, Switzerland, and Austria. And we would probably be able to get funding in Switzerland easier than in Germany. But then we have Invest in Switzerland and not in Germany. And since we are now for some decades working on the implementation also in Germany, we will keep doing that until until it will. I don't even know, until it has to be worked for a long time, or it has to be worked on for a long time. But yeah, the funding is in this sense, in this time, not the first motivator, or also the first headache we are having right now. It's more really to do the small steps and to see, how this connection to the communities can be lay out and hold on, and not just we have one person who is dedicated, for example, in community work, but once this person is gone, the whole studies is changing into whatever it is changing. So funding is important, but as we already saw, within this UN decade, how fragile also the achievements are. We don't want to get too close attached to also the power of this funding. In Berlin, for example, we had until last year a very progressive government, state of Berlin, which pushed this notion also of intersectional Black European studies. But due to some chaotic election we had 2 years ago, it even made it to the New York Times. That is a little bit embarrassing that Berlin can everything except for an airport and now for elections. So we apparently cannot even do elections very well. So we had to do the election over again. And that happened last year. And so a conservative new government came into power. And they took out all the money for the UN decade and for intersectional Black European studies. That showed again, how fragile these achievements are. And it was very clear that cannot hold us back, and we cannot be determined by whether we have this funding now or we don't have it. So it doesn't mean that if somebody here, has a great idea, especially, how we can get the funding in Germany in then conjunction, that would be great. Because that's also what we did with BEST. And then we had a second grant, Alexander von Humboldt Foundation, which was for the US part. But we didn't do it the other way around, to get first the funding from the US.
Claudia, you mentioned the conference in Rio. Would you mind putting that link in the Q&A, and I'll share it with our other guests that are inquiring about that conference? They'd like to learn more about it. And now Akila Richards asked, what do you think older Black Germans can do to pass on the baton? What might be the urgent things and wisdom we can share?
I don't know what wisdom I have. I think it's important. The older I get, the more I'm very interested in intergenerational work, because I see everything what we learned. Maybe not everything, but a lot what we learned is not very helpful to me. It's very hierarchical what we learned in this way, and also very, like boxed in this way. This is one generation, and the next is we have actually no connections, and I don't like that. I think through the movements we always have these connections, and what I said earlier, I think young generations, they have a lot of challenges and obstacles, and especially with a future vision, they have harsher times to deal with and harsher task and work to do. So I think maybe the biggest wisdom I can give is a certain optimism. I always said, I'm a professional optimist, because in my personal life, I cannot always hold myself to the standards. But professionally, I think there is no other option to optimism, in the sense of that our movements, as you said, Rose, the train left the station. It will not be stopped. And if you have that really embodied, and if you can pass that on, then people will, get empowered out of this notion also in dire times, because that means you can tap into another source than what you usually get offered. And what you usually get offered is a very normalized source, whether there is nobody, or there is no future, or some work stopped and didn't continue. And if you can, all of this negative narratives, if you have a source to tap into, that the Black diasporic experience is now going on for centuries, and it is passed on to next generations, and there is no other opportunity, there is no option to being optimistic for our collective futures. That I think can help younger people, or I hope so. That's what I have to offer.
Okay, and now we don't have any other questions, but I'd like to know, first of all, I'd like to thank you again. As I said before we started, no one but you can know how grateful I am that you're here with us and what it means to me and what it means to me as the founder of the BGHRA. It's kind of a bringing the circle back together because you were there at the beginning, you know, and not that it's at the end because we're not really ready
Yeah.
to close, but yeah, I'm just so grateful to you. So before you leave, are there words of wisdom you'd like to share with us that you can tell us, that we can continue to do, or just something else you'd like to say, or a way that we can follow your work as you, so we don't get lost, with what you're doing over there?
Well, you won't get lost, follow your path, and that's exactly, I mean, that's what you see, with your work. You had so much dedication for that, to build up this organization and to hold this space for so many years. That is just a wonderful work. In terms of intersectional Black European studies, we are right now busy to create a digital space where also and the archives will be filled, of works and from the Black movements in Germany that will continue to be step by step being filled in. So you can, follow this and but also be a part in a sense of a larger way. That's why, as Maisha Uma uh, 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 put it, it is a school of thought. So again, it's not some there is not an institute, there is not some physical space you can go, but there is a school of thought, and you can be part of it, and not only a passive part of it, but a very active part of it. And that doesn't have to be me as a person, but as I hopefully lined it out, it's much larger. So there's a lot to come.
Well, I said in the beginning also that this is the first time you were a keynote at our conference, but I hope and pray it's not the last, because I've truly enjoyed this. Just as a conversation, I've missed you, and the conversation has to continue publicly and privately, right? So, and for now, I
Absolutely,
guess,
absolutely.
and yep, and I guess now we'll let everybody go get their soda, coffee, take a little break, and we'll see you at the next event. Thank you so much, Peggy. And we'll talk again
Thank you,
soon.
and absolutely, and thank you also to everybody, and enjoy the rest of the conference. I hope I will see you soon in a physical space.
Yes,
Bye bye.
absolutely. Bye bye.